Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. This is it's been over a year since the last time we posted an episode on the evening queue. It's Misha Peterzak once again filling in for Miles Wolf, and Misha. This time, I actually have another guest, and his name is Fred. You want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Fred.
Yeah, good. Right on. Yeah. So, how long have we known each other? About a year, probably.
Been just about a year, I'd say. So
Yeah.
I met you at a bar, and you decided to move to America after all.
That's such a how do you say? It's almost like we're we're a couple, you know. Oh, I met him at a bar, you know.
It's a very romantic introduction story.
Yeah. Right.
On my headstone, I wanted to say met Misha at a bar.
Yeah, exactly.
They were inseparable.
No, but I think in the States, especially, like the States has a lot of nice kind of traditional American pubs where you could meet people if they're open to it, right? If they're social, you know.
The bars that I enjoy going to are the ones that serve alcohol and don't do much else. Music is always a perk, but that's where I find to meet authentic folk who we've all got drinking in common, but otherwise we come from all walks of life. I mean, at the end of a day of work, who doesn't want a beer?
Yeah, right. But it's hard to find though, like bars that only have drinking now, right? I remember you telling me this like a while ago, right? Where like for instance the bars that we go to all the time, right? They're protected under some sort of like statute of limitations where they don't have to actually have a food menu anymore, even though new bars that set up nowadays do have to have food, right?
My understanding, it's been a while since I've looked into that. I read city planning and state documents for fun, and so I try to. I'm curious about liquor laws and like transportation and building stuff. But yeah, when it comes to bars, that I think there are different classes of liquor licenses in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah,
and that it's a cheaper license to be able to, if your drinking establishment offers food as well. But if you are just serving booze, you're either grandfathered in, which is a lot of the bars that we go to, Misha.
Yeah.
Or else you're paying a substantial premium to not have food. And I guess, I don't know. I can't speak to any basis or logic one way or the other. It just depends on what type of business you want to open.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Well, that's good. I think you should put that on a t-shirt one day as a quote, you know. I like bars that just have alcohol and nothing else.
Yep.
You know. But
give me the booze, music is a perk.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but I guess what are we here to talk about today? I think the topic was wanted to talk to you about cities, right?
I've heard about cities. I like to live in them.
Yeah, I mean, don't we all, right? I mean, but no, because I know, you know, you have a lot of good ideas and good opinions on cities and how they are designed and what makes them nice and what contributes to the downfall of cities and everything. So, you know, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on some of these things. So, for instance, let's just start off with something very generic, like what do you think makes a great city, let's say, in your eyes?
I think people make a great city. The people are what are the labor, they are the consumers, they are the workers, the helpers, the enjoyers. Like, the people are the city. Buildings exist to provide shelter for humans, but it is the humans, the people who are what make up the city. Humans pay taxes. We're the ones who vote. Like, the building doesn't do anything. Like, taxes owed on a building, but it's still a person. Or, I mean, in America, they think that companies are people as well, but
yeah,
they it all comes down to the people. And outside of that, I think that, you know, you're a town, you're a village, and then you're a city at a certain, I don't know if I'd say it's a density or a more finite, like, population number. like a quantity of people, or the density in which how many people live in a finite amount of land.
Right.
And in America, we've got a lot of spread out cities, like cities that are just absolutely massive.
I noticed,
in
yeah.
geographic, like land use, like the amount of space, the political boundaries that they have is a lot of land.
Yeah.
But the population density is not much. But when I think about England or other places in Europe, and it's just like these are cities that have existed before the automobile, and like most of their development happened, pre 1900s, and now they've got these 100-year-old buildings, 100 plus, and populations there are smaller, but the density is higher. And I personally think that they've got a higher quality of life for that people are able to just walk 2 blocks to get a loaf of bread and some eggs to get their daily needs. They go on a walk around the block, they can get everything they need. It's a bit harder in America, even Minneapolis. I mean, we're kind of smack dab. It's Midwest, but it's the middle of, little parts of the East Coast, a little bit of the West Coast, but still.
That's true. I mean, like I know with you notice the difference between, I would say, like a livable city, right, and then a kind of not so livable city, right? And like what you're saying about the European cities, I know what you're talking about, like, because there's a lot of population density in those cities, but they also have like the infrastructure to support people living in such a dense area, right? Because when there's so many people living in a dense area, let's say not everyone's going to have cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because it is so dense, right, there isn't enough space for a car for every person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they have, in general, like good transit systems, as an example, right?
Yep.
Where I noticed here in the States, it's quite the opposite, and I guess it's just because of like the America's history, where it was designed for the big open spaces, the big open land. That's what attracted people here, and it was all about having a car to drive somewhere, right? And the American dream, and
it being like America being founded in 1776, or I don't remember if that date has changed due to history, but like the country is not as old as European countries, and that it was pretty slummy historically until like the Industrial Revolution, and then America really shot forward on the global scale as a world power, and a part of that was the invention of the automobile, which compared to a horse and buggy, or for a small day trip journey, or else a streetcar system, which was outdated or sometimes hard to maintain occasionally. And so like the automobile was a great invention for the time. It provided a purpose. And now we flash forward 120 years, and I don't think that I think that the perks of the automobile have run their course in America, and that the city planners have to get back to focusing on people. Because roads keep getting wider, vehicles keep getting faster, and so you provide more real estate for a road, but where are the buildings? Where do the people live? And why are needs so difficult to get met? In Minneapolis, there's a principle, or around the world perhaps, but like food deserts exist in Minneapolis.
What does that mean again?
A food desert is just like an area where a grocery store is kind of an exorbitant distance away. Like the neighborhoods don't have grocery stores. And so you have to, you can go on a walk or a bike ride, but if you're 5 miles away from your closest grocer, then having a vehicle makes a lot more sense, even though you are in the city of Minneapolis proper.
Yeah. Okay. Because I noticed. Well, there's a few YouTube channels that I I don't even know how I came across them just randomly on YouTube, but I don't know if I told you about them before, but they kind of analyze like a lot of American cities and like how they're designed, and like touching on what you were saying about having these big roads, but where are all the buildings and where do people live, right? And it basically just creates just like a river of cars, essentially, right?
Yep.
And he would take cities like like I think his channel is called City Nerd. I think
City Nerd. Okay.
City Nerd, yeah, City Nerd, and then there's one called like I think it's called like Bike. The word bike is in the channel name, but basically like you take a city like Las Vegas or something, right? And you look at how wide the streets are, like 3 lanes each way going each way, and then you have like a bike path and a sidewalk that looks like just an afterthought, essentially,
yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And it's almost like their cities do that just because that's kind of what they envision as like, a street has to have a road for the cars, a pathway for the cars, bike and pedestrians, but they don't actually expect pedestrians to be walking on those streets.
Yeah.
Right.
And in a design like that, then the road becomes a barrier in itself to anyone not in a vehicle able to accelerate 220 miles an hour to cross, we'll say, 7 lanes of traffic.
Yeah.
That if you're stuck in the middle when the light changes, well, then you're screwed.
Yeah, and like think about like, let's say like people with physical disabilities or older people, right?
Absolutely. Like there's a lot of inaccessibility that I think it's inevitable if urban design in America maintains just thinking about the vehicle, like the motor vehicle, and then having pedestrians and just non-motorized transportation as an afterthought. We've got an extra 4 feet on each side. We'll put some concrete slabs and call it a sidewalk.
Yeah.
But not thinking about then the utility boxes that also have to use that space because they can't put a utility box in the road. And this is something, I guess if I would go to school, I would want to study this. To the listeners, I don't have a college degree. I like working with coffee, but I live with my eyes open, as I like to say, and I pay attention to what doesn't work in the world that I live, and I don't think that I'm the only one, as I have found a bit of a community where it just is, where I say, why is it like this? And I say, well, here's a rule that they've been building on for the past 50 years, and we can change it, but it takes time. It's an uphill struggle, and in Minneapolis, there's a lot of public hearings, which I think over the years they've been used to kind of instigate delays, to create delays in projects. That I've watched some road reconstructions come through, and the initial proposal is like, wow, I can't believe that an American thought of this. But then due to public hearings and they say, we're listening to all sides, then it gets watered down, diluted, and then you just have another 4-lane road with a sidewalk and a bike lane as an afterthought. And it's I've been paying attention to that for about at least 10 years at this point. And it's at this point I'm just tired, and it's like make it safe for everyone.
Well, I mean, in terms of America though, if you look online, let's say for in terms of bikeability just as an example, Minneapolis is actually like rated in the top end of that spectrum, and I see what they're what these statistics or what these surveys are talking about, because I do think there is a lot of bike accessibility here, but obviously it's you're still in an American city that wasn't designed for it in the first place. But I think just as an outsider, I think they did a good job of maybe over the years in implementing all these alternate modes of transportation for people without cars, right? Compared to some other cities where it's just you wouldn't even think of riding a bicycle. Yeah. I mean, so to give you an example though, growing up in Vancouver, Canada, right? In the suburbs, I've always been used to riding my bicycle in the bike lane that's right on the street next to the lane of cars. Like it's never like what they have here in Minneapolis, let's say like in I guess in downtown, but even let's say the Greenway, right? Something like that.
For it to be completely the Midtown Greenway is completely grade separated. It used to be a railway. And then the railroads were not used anymore. The County, I think, bought the land, and it still took probably 25 years for the rails to get ripped up and then for it to be paved to just be a bike and pedestrian thoroughfare. Like it is a bike superhighway of sorts. Like it's got limited access points, and it runs all the way through Minneapolis, east to west, and then through to western suburbs as well. All on old railway road right of way.
How long is it roughly again?
Well, east to west in the city, it's about 6 miles, and then when it is like in contiguous length of it not being on, you can start at the Mississippi River. I think you can go at least 15 miles and only crossing intersections, but not needing to share a roadway with another vehicle.
Yeah.
It'll go out to Hopkins, Minnesota. Oh gosh, that's got to be more than 15 miles, I think.
I need to look up where this is.
Yeah, it's a western. I guess technically it's a suburb, but you go through a couple other suburbs to get there, and it's another kind of old town with a. Historically, I think Hopkins was a streetcar suburb to Minneapolis. So that's where the Greenway will terminate.
Way out there. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And do you have a distance pulled up, or if you're able to?
Let me check.
While you're
it's
waiting.
Was it just between Brooklawns and Minnetonka, right? And like right in the middle of those. Okay. So to Hopkins.
And after a certain point in Hopkins, it will. Then it turns to gravel, and the trail continues, and it is still railroad right of way. Whew, take that as a tongue twister. And it's a phenomenal resource. Like, I'm grateful for it. I have been lucky enough for my years in Minneapolis, to have always chosen to live next to it because of the resource that it is for recreation and the neighborhoods that it goes through, for me to get my needs met.
10 miles, it says, from here.
From this location to
From
Hopkins.
this location, yeah, to Hopkins.
Okay.
So via the Midtown Greenway, yeah.
And I guess from this location, it's another about mile east to the river. So that it appears that there's about 11 to 12 miles paved, and then it switches to gravel, and then it goes through Eden Prairie. I think the most I've done was 22 miles in one direction, 22 miles west. Then I turned around and came back.
20, and that's in miles. Like,
yeah.
I'm converting that in my head like into kilometers, and that's freaking far, man.
How many kilometers is that?
Like 22 miles, it's something like 30, I think it's like 35 kilometers or something. So, to me, that's pretty far.
Yeah.
That's pretty far. And that's just one way. Yeah, 35.4 kilometers.
Okay. You know your stuff, Mr. Metric.
I know, man. Well, hey, here's another thing. I mean, metric just makes sense, man. You know the, like, most of the rest of the world, uses metric aside from America and then I guess the UK, right? But the UK's imperial is different from the American imperial system, just to add more confusion.
Yep, absolutely.
Right?
Why bother?
Yeah.
I like millimeters. I think those, like a millimeter Allen wrench is a hell of a lot easier to work with than, I need the 3/16 inch Allen wrench, please. Like, get out of here. Like, give me a whole number. Millimeters make sense to me. Distance, I could get used to that. I'm raised in Fahrenheit. I guess to me, 65 degrees is a good temperature. I don't know how that would translate to Celsius, but it's like 35 Celsius.
See, that's the one unit of measure is the temperature where my brain doesn't really understand still, like Fahrenheit. Yeah. Like if someone says a Fahrenheit number to me, my brain doesn't really comprehend, let's say, like how hot or cold that is. Like I still have to obviously like the extremes, like I know what the extremes are. So like 100 Fahrenheit, I know that's hella hot. That's hella hot, yeah. And then like I know basically anything below 32 Fahrenheit is freezing, so I know that how cold that is. Yep. But when everything's like, for me, like the 50s and 60s and the 70s are the gray area where I'm just like,
That's
like
because it's comfortable. That's just the comfortable zone, so it doesn't matter. It just you'll be in a t-shirt if you're active.
I guess so.
You know, avoid shade, and with a gentle breeze, you're just comfortable. I'd say that doesn't matter.
I guess so. Yeah, but because it's like 65. I'm thinking like, oh, what is that like? Well, because I will say though, in that comfortable area, in that comfortable range though, you do sometimes there is a point where you have to think, okay, no, this is hoodie weather, like sweatshirt weather, or no, this is t-shirt weather. Yep. Because it can't just be all lumped together. I mean,
30 degrees is a pretty. There's a lot of change in that. I remember just this winter you were saying, like 32, that's not that cold, and I was like, yeah, but 32 is freezing. It's 0 right now. That's 30 degrees below freezing.
Yeah,
and I remember kind of seeing a aha moment on your face in that conversation.
That's
like,
right.
Yeah, like -6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's frigid. Like that is. What's that movie? The Christmas Story. That's get your tongue stuck on a pole type cold.
Yeah, because when I hear Americans talking about like, oh, it's like 5 degrees and like it's super cold, and I'm thinking, wait, what?
Yeah.
No, like 5 degrees. That's not even freezing. Oh no, Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
Never mind. That's
still 25 degrees
well
below the freezing points of water.
Exactly. So I actually did. I wanted to know what the conversion kind of is between Fahrenheit and Celsius, and so I realized every 10 degrees Celsius is 18 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the
really. So that's it. Just a 1.8.
1.8.
Yeah. Okay.
Roughly. I'm pretty sure. So,
and like for what it's worth, I'm not going to be a complete Celsius denier. Like the principles of it make a lot of sense. Where 0 is freezing, 100 is boiling. Like that is, I think, a phenomenal scale to base something on. Is the freezing and boiling point of water, a resource that everyone should have access to, and a gauge for that. And I'm sure it is just because I'm raised in it, like I said, of 65 degrees, that's perfect for me.
Well, like the one of my colleagues at work, we were talking about this because some of our European colleagues came to visit us in the office. They were here for some other business, but anyway, we were talking about the Europeans. They're metric like me, right? And we were talking about the metric system versus imperial, and I said something about like about this Celsius and Fahrenheit thing, and my one American colleague, he said, well, Fahrenheit, like 100 degrees Fahrenheit is what people use to measure their body temperature. They measure their body temperature in Fahrenheit, right? Because 100 degrees Fahrenheit is, I can't remember what it was, but I think 100 degrees is like your normal resting body temperature. Like
98.6.
98.6, yeah. Okay.
That is the so-called, then air quote, healthy temperature.
Right.
Some people run cold, some people run hot, but that for some reason is the benchmark. I would be curious to learn more if
it was
for like
98.6.
the basis of that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because and I think he said something. It was like the history of it is like that's just what they deemed is like your body temperature. Okay, that's 98.6, right? But he said, think about it though. Do you know what like when someone says, oh, I have a fever of 103, right, or something. That's Fahrenheit, obviously, but he said, like, think about it. Have you ever set your body temperature in Celsius? And we're like, no,
even growing up, like your fever was in Fahrenheit.
Because body temperatures are always in Fahrenheit. Like it's just one of those common.
Interesting.
Because it makes more. It's more like a round, whole number or something, right?
Okay.
I mean, there's certain things like that where just one system makes more sense. I think, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I know. Let's say like Europeans, they, and Australians, I guess too, right? They would, they know they're like true to the metric system, so they know their weight of their bodies, right? The weight in kilograms, and also their height in meters and centimeters. But as a Canadian, we for those two measurements, units of measurement, we use the imperial.
So you use the American pound and
exactly. And feet and inches.
Feet and inches.
And it's mostly due to the fact that we share the same sports, And
True.
in sports, your metrics, your body metrics are taken in,
It's the stats.
those are like, the standard stats. So it's just something we've adopted. And so that's why growing up in in school in Canada or something, if you said how much you weigh in kilograms, no one knows what you're talking about, even though we should.
Yeah.
But we don't, right? However,
Is your meat then in like at a grocery store? Do you buy a pound of butter, or do you buy like 4 kilograms, or I guess a liter of beer?
So
I'm curious about these other measurements.
So when it comes to weight, as an example, every other situation where you take the weight measurement, we'll do it in the metric system. But it's only for those certain, just very specific situations, like our own body.
Yep.
Because again, mostly due to sports and everything. But then when it's like just in normal life, meat at the grocery store, no, that'll be in dollars per kilogram, right?
Yep.
And then in volume, we always use liters and milliliters.
Sure.
And it's nice to see, like, when I buy stuff here in the States, that they have both on everything usually, right? So
So less of a learning curve for you there. It's a 12-ounce bottle, but also 355 milliliters.
Exactly. Well, and also, like, when it comes to a pint, right? A pint of beer, let's say.
Yeah.
I think in Canada, I think everyone would know that that's 16 ounces, or they should, right? And I think actually at breweries, they will say they'll list it in ounces, like the sizes of the glass and everything. Yeah, we don't use milliliters in those cases, right? Okay. Very, very weird stuff.
It seems like a much more like brewing part of the world when coming to beer, where it's like going to Germany or Belgium, like there you're getting 500 milliliters of beer. Like that is like, and I've seen that etched on glasses of like Stella and.
That's true. I think I even have.
Oh gosh, we're getting a tour.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna bring one of my glasses here. I can't even remember where I got this glass from, but you'll see right there. This is a half pint.
Half pint.
So it's 0.25 liters, right? Which is 250 milliliters. And because a pint is 0.5 liters, right?
Yes.
Which is 500 milliliters. Yeah. So it's interesting. So, and I remember when I was working in Europe at the bar, I remember when they were trained bartenders, they would use like centiliters. So like the shot, the jigger, right, that you use to pour alcohol, to measure out your alcohol before you pour it in a customer's glass, is in centiliters. So 4 centiliters is roughly the equivalent of an ounce, I would say. Okay. I think, right? But so I remember learning this stuff, like, it's 4 centiliters of rum, 2 centiliters of, but it's interesting. These different systems. Yeah. I mean, I can't even remember how we even started talking about this, but this is good. I like it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm okay with it. I'm trying to think of how to tying it back in the cities where.
Oh yeah.
Like, America, it is a melting pot. We do have people from all over the place.
That's right.
And like meeting you at the bar, like the first thing your dad said to me was, he leaned over and said, "So, do you ride the train that often?" And I said, "I do occasionally, but it's kind of dirty these days. It's gone downhill." Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe everywhere in the world, but definitely everywhere in America, it seems that there is a substantially increasing amount of homelessness everywhere. Yeah. And public buildings get a lot of people, I'll say squatting. I like to be more PC, but there's a lot of open drug use and, I guess, public urination. And at this train station that we live closest to, that's kind of a deterrent to me sometimes for that station in particular.
I understand.
I guess we wound up just talking, and I remember your dad kind of calling me out. He said, "What the hell, man? Like, what are you doing in America? Like, there's a whole rest of the world if you don't want to drive." I said, "Well, I was born here, and it's my home, and there's other barriers to entry, and to being able to move. And I guess, truthfully, I'm comfortable here, and I feel like I've got a good purpose, or like for the knowledge and the passion that I share about just people driving less at this point." I know it's there's currently a proposal, or a study, like in the state legislature in Minnesota, to remove Interstate 94 within city limits. And it's to be studied, and of course, I would like it to become reality, but I don't know what the feasibility is at this point. So I guess I use my energy on lesser things, like a general road reconstruction, but I care about the city. I was born here, and I want it to be as good for the people for the next 30 some years.
Yeah, totally.
For my age, like, I want to have my stories inspire change, so then other people don't have to break their shoulder in a pothole or get hit by a car turning left as you're on a painted bike lane. It's just like, well, like that is where my motivation comes, is having bad experiences myself, not wanting other people to experience that.
Yeah, because like when you're talking about the trains there, a couple people that I've met here in Minneapolis that are not from here as well, and even like the couch surfers I host here, right? They ask me about the train, and I'm like, everyone has the same opinion. It's like, what the hell are people doing on that train? Like, because it is. Yeah, just full disclosure, it is, mostly the quote-unquote bums, let's say, that people would call them, right? But a lot of just kind of, homeless or people doing drugs or whatever on the train. And it kind of just makes it just like a moving kind of dump almost. Like, because... Yeah, have you ever been on there and there's guys just smoking cigarettes like in the train?
No, cigarettes occasionally, but I've heard about people getting secondhand intoxication from like another drug.
Oh,
that someone exhaled, like, I don't know what, but they're like, I think I might be high afterwards. Someone exhaled whatever they smoked, and that's a bit of a public health crisis in itself.
Yeah, no, totally.
On top of sanitation and.
Yeah, because the one guy I know, he's from Boston or New Hampshire, but lived in Boston for the last 10 years, and he was telling me about the trains and how asking me if I ever ride them, and for me it's usually just to the airport and back, or to like if I go to see a Twins game or something, for baseball, right? Because it's nice and convenient, but yeah, like other than that. There's not enough kind of just, how do you put this properly, like normal, like just everyday civilians that ride it, I feel like, especially in the daylight hours, maybe in like early in the morning, some people are going to work, whatever, but just in the majority of the hours of operation, it is a kind of a little bit sketchy, let's say, but
and like, because that is what really frustrates me, is that transit in, I'll say, the Twin Cities metro, so like Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then all of our first and there's 7 counties in this close to megalopolis. I think the population is close to 4 million now across all 7 counties.
That's right.
But transit, and especially like high dollar but also high value transit, such as installing rail, it seems to be catered or like designed towards a commuter class only, as opposed to using transit instead of a vehicle. No. And so, like you were saying, Misha, that the so-called common folk aren't using the train, it's because they live in America and so many other people do have vehicles.
Yeah.
And so they just have other options, and where it's a little more of a, I don't want to say virtue signaling, but it's like, I ride the train because I want to. It's not, I ride the train because I have to. For a lot of the business class people who live along like the Hiawatha corridor, where that there's a lot of people. It runs just into downtown Minneapolis, and especially after COVID, and like if everyone can work from home, that people aren't commuting at all.
Yeah,
and so it's kind of in my opinion, the origin story, or like the narrative of transit, has to change, because it was decent for commuters for the past, we'll say, 40 years. The Blue Line light rail has only been around for 15, I think.
Oh, okay. So not that long, I guess.
Yeah, I think it opened, gosh, maybe it's 20. I think it was about 2002, 2003 that the first segment opened.
Wow.
So like it's a great resource. It goes from downtown Minneapolis to the airport to the Mall of America, and it costs you $2. Like that's pretty hard to. If you're not needing to swat away secondhand smoke, it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sad but true. I call it how it is. Like.
Yeah. No. Of course. I mean, because it would be nice though if it could be though one of those everyday transit options that people actually use, as an everyday commuter, let's say. Because, for instance, my friend from Boston, he was saying like, no, in Boston, like a lot of people don't have a car because they use the metro system, and they have like 5 lines or something, right? Which for an American city, I'm realizing is pretty good.
Boston has a pretty good transit system. It is old. I've been there a couple times, and again, it's a really old city. And so Boston, a lot of it was built out before the car even existed. Like that's why you have so many kind of like New York-esque, like tall stone and brick buildings before wood got cheaper, like wood construction buildings, which is a lot of what we see here. So like there's an element of that. And so like you've got old buildings without garages.
Yeah.
And that there's an image that lives rent-free in my mind of 2 motor vehicles take up as much space as a 800 square foot apartment, because it still takes space to maneuver.
Yeah.
And that is a whole lot of space that you dedicate to 2 cars, where like 800 square feet, that's a pretty decent sized apartment. Like that's easily a 2-bedroom.
Yeah.
In terms of just like cars versus people.
It's bigger than the apartment we're sitting in right now.
Space, yeah. And like truthfully, given the layout, this is spacious. And so like I could only imagine 800 is just like, wow, we could actually have a party here.
Yeah.
Or you can store your car.
Exactly.
It's really good when you're moving, but otherwise it just takes up space.
Yeah. No. Yeah. You're right about that.
But I digressed about Boston. You were their metro. What were you?
Yeah. Like basically, I was told that people use it as their daily transit, to get around, to get to work, to everything, because it is, sufficient enough, and it's clean, and it doesn't have like the predominant, let's say, class of people on it is just a pretty like average person, right? It's not like a lot of homeless or whatever, because he said like over there with the normal Northeast attitude, people would tell them to fuck off, right? Like they would get the fuck off this train.
That is true. Yeah. Minnesota Nice is not doing favors here.
Yeah, well, and I think because also most people aren't even using this every day anyway, and so when they use it once in a blue moon, they just accept it for what it is, and that's why it doesn't really change anything. I mean, it would be nice if there were a couple more lines here. Like if they were to install, let's say one more additional metro line in the Twin Cities. Where do you think it should go to and from? I'm actually interested.
Yeah,
I've been thinking about
really
it myself.
Good question.
Yeah.
We've currently got the blue line that is north-south, currently from downtown Minneapolis to the Mall of America, passing through the airport. And that is going to have a northern extension added that'll run through North Minneapolis, through the city of Robbinsdale, Crystal, and then it ends, I believe, in Brooklyn Center.
Really? When is that supposed to happen?
Well,
yeah,
it's hard for me to talk about transit without giving so many caveats of who knows. I think it is starting to get funded through the state legislature, but it is still in the design phases. And then that brings me to, so I think maybe let's say 2028.
Yeah,
that it's the current projected operating date.
A good 5 years
from now.
out. Yeah. Okay.
But then we also have the Green Line, which runs east-west between downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul, largely along University Avenue.
Yeah.
For that, and that has, for the past, gosh, it's got to be 4 years, has been under an extension for that has been under construction to go west, to continue west, going through the aforementioned city of Hopkins, and then to the Eden Prairie.
Really?
But that is currently under heavy review over rather not heavy review, it's being audited because there's been a lot of over budget things, and so I don't know what the actual future is.
Do they have rail tracks or railroad tracks already there, like the infrastructure there to just extend the line, or do they actually have to build?
They have to.
Oh, okay.
And I'm frustrated because they are doing this route, or part of this route of the Green Line extension, and I will get to where I want a future transit line to be, but they're building this light rail absolutely in parallel with freight rail. And it's just again, it's another, I find it to be a poor use of resources where there are different routings that could happen. Yeah, and it bypasses the densest areas of Minneapolis as well. And so that's just frustrating in itself. Where would I put another train? I think, given how it is right now, I think a train from northeast Minneapolis and then kind of cutting through downtown to southwest Minneapolis.
Let me look this up on the...
would be an excellent route. There's currently any development for that. There aren't existing railroad right of ways.
Yeah.
And so it would have to just be built on a street, and that, of course, would have substantial uphill battle.
So going from northeast to where again?
Through say Central to Hennepin, and then following Hennepin maybe by Bede-Makaska, and then ending in Edina or something.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I don't know the demographic research. I'm not a transit planner, I'm not a demographer, but Northeast does not have good transit, and because of that, I refuse to live in that part of the city.
It's supposed to be the trendy area, man.
They say so, and everyone's driving, and then everyone who drives complains about traffic, and I say I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
That's... I say, you knew what you're getting into, right?
Right. Okay. Northeast to basically Edina, let's say.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting, yeah.
And there's that, and I guess there's a style of city planning or transit planning, and I think Paris is a prime example of it. It's called the hub and spoke mentality, where you have a lot of intersecting lines in the middle, and then instead of having other lines just spinning out of the middle, that you've got a ring road, say 5 miles away from city center. Mm-hmm. And then that is how you would transfer to the other lines. In contrast with New York City, where granted that's a geographical change, where the island of Manhattan, you've got 5 lines running just all north-south 3 blocks away from one another.
Yeah.
But there's no kind of circuitous option.
Yeah, and that's a good point you brought up, because when I lived in Europe, it was in France and it was in Paris, and I was I guess now looking back on it in hindsight, I probably took it for granted, the transit. I mean, the public transportation was my only transportation, right? And so I was taking metro.
Never defeat your feet, though.
Yeah.
You can always walk. Pedestrian is always first. Just saying.
But it's because there was wherever you live, if you live within the périphérique, it's called, that ring road, which is the city proper of Paris. You usually live within a couple blocks of a certain station, whether it's the metro or they do have kind of like the light, like a light rail as well.
Okay.
Like, so metro is all underground and
Okay.
and a little bit, and the parts that are above ground are above the street level, right?
Yes.
Like a sky train, we call it. And so you're always within a few blocks of some sort of stop. And so yeah, I do my walking and stuff to the stops and from the stops and where I'm my final destination. And then in the summertime, I would usually just skateboard the city. I would
very nice.
longboard the city, which is amazing. But yeah, and I was like, oh yeah, this is great. I mean, the transit is beautiful there. And yeah, you're right about all the intersecting lines. And eventually over time you get to learn certain lines and where you're going and everything. And I know as a kid, the last time I went to London, England, similar thing, right? They have a pretty extensive subway. They call it the tube. The tube. The tube system. And then you get back to North America and you don't really have that here. And I noticed that when in Minneapolis, in Twin Cities as well, like the two lines basically just go from share one common point, which is downtown Minneapolis, and they just go in two separate directions, but there's no interlocking. The interlocking between the lines has to be by bus or if you want to walk or something. But yeah. So yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice if there was some sort of network like that. And I never really noticed New York's. I've only been to New York once, like New York City once, and but most of their lines are kind of just running parallel to each other. Just
in Manhattan at least, and then like Bronx and Queens, they're just so much more spread out, anyways, and so you've got substantially more distance between those spurs, I guess I would call where the lines branch off.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking. So I guess from northeast to Edina along Hennepin is kind of like a substitute for taking like the I-35W, let's say, right?
True.
Like, essentially, which that's a good idea. Yeah. I mean, I don't know where I would put a line. I just wanted to get your opinion because I've never really thought about it before. Yeah. But
go ahead.
No, I've kind of just gotten used to what the city is and just kind of adapt to it,
Yeah, and I do want to give St. Paul some love. They deserve a north-south rail line as well, and I think I write occasionally for a blog called Streets.mn, and I think it was on some articles there, like discussion about articles that came up of kind of creating a triangular route. So you've got the green line going east to west from downtown Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul. You've got the blue line that goes north-south from downtown Minneapolis to the Mall of America. And then I think that St. Paul should have a downtown St. Paul to the Mall of America line. Because then that could just be a ring road, like a little triangle.
Yeah.
Interconnecting, like there you get the nodes, and then you can start building intersecting routes off of that.
True. Because
so that I'd say is Exhibit 1B, or like preference, like secondary preference.
Because St. Paul, for me, I think it's essential to have a couple different options of getting to the airport from cities, right? And because we're in Twin Cities, St. Paul doesn't really have that option on the train, and the train is by far the fastest
absolutely
option in terms of transit, right? If you had to take I know there's a bus that goes from MSP to downtown St. Paul. I've seen it there in the terminal before.
More of a private bus?
No, it's a public bus. I think it's an
Route
express
54,
bus.
I believe.
Yeah,
but a limited stop. It is a local route.
Yeah,
but it doesn't stop as often.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like it kind of, I don't know how useful it is to people, but yeah, that would be good because then if you had a triangle, now like you said, you could make other lines off of that go from one node of the triangle to another node of the triangle, but continuing on past those nodes, right?
Yep.
That would be a good idea.
I fantasize transit lines as a lesson in tangential lines. Going back to geometry, it's just let's get a tangent on this angle, and there goes another route. You got a new node. Let's build off of that.
Yeah, right. Oh man, but there's something I was meaning to ask. Okay, transit lines. Okay, I asked you what your transit line was. Man, you can see I haven't done this in a while.
No, I think you're doing good. I mean, let's hope that what's his face stays on vacation.
Yeah,
I like you just fine, Misha.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, Miles Wolf, he's still just taking long sabbatical.
Very nice. Yeah, still raking in that COVID unemployment, I guess.
Totally right. No, but here's what I was wanting to ask actually. For me, okay. I like having train lines in cities, like I call them metro or subway, but I don't like it when it's in the form of light rail, when it's on surface level with the rest of on grade, right? Because that also has effects on the actual traffic of the city,
Absolutely,
right?
it does, yeah.
And so, I wish I don't know how feasible it is here based on the geography here in Minnesota, but do you think it would be, let's say they did build these extensions or let's say built a new line or something, I would like to see it go underground or above grade, so like a SkyTrain, so just a story above the traffic level. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, let's say?
I fully support that. I lived in Chicago for a little bit, and so I'm familiar with riding their L, standing for elevated train.
Yeah.
That only 2 of their lines go subterranean, and those are only when they're downtown. Or it's the red and blue line in Chicago that go underground that are true subways. Everything else is elevated, but at the end of those routes, they get to grade at a little bit, but only for maybe 4 stops out of, say 25.
Yeah.
I would love to have transit that I didn't see and hear.
Okay.
It would be really nice, and I have heard supposedly Minneapolis is poised, or we are built on top of a big sheet of bedrock. And so it would be expensive to go through, but once you have the first an entrance and an exit hole dug, then you just lay tracks, and then you never see the train again.
Yeah.
And so that is a fantasy. I would love if the train would go underground or a new line. I think fun fact, and double check me and get back to us if I'm wrong on this, but supposedly at the University of Minnesota, they've got some tunnels that instead of clearing out the bedrock horizontally, they just dug the tunnel deeper and used the bedrock as the roof of the tunnel.
Oh, okay.
And so it's there, it's not, it's maybe you're going an extra 10 feet under.
Yeah.
But for a massive sheet of rock on top of you as opposed to just earth, soil.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of engineering benefits that would come from subways in the Twin Cities here. And elevated, I don't know. I'm less intrigued with that. I think subway, the word subway just has so much of a allure to it.
Yeah.
There's a romance of, I'm going to Paris, I'm going to take the subway. Eat a baguette on the subway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe sometimes I think the reason for elevated subways, let's say, is because there are some geographical restrictions or constraints if they were to take it underground. Because I know Vancouver, right? We have 3. I think we have, technically 4, but it's really 3. And the 4th one's just an extension on one of the existing subway lines, but they call it a different line. Basically, there's 4 subway lines, and none of them are on grade, on street level, right? It's always either when it's in the city of Vancouver, it's below ground. For one of them is below ground for the entire city of Vancouver, and then the other 2 are below ground when they're in downtown, but when they're in the residential areas of Vancouver, so outside of downtown, they're elevated on a SkyTrain. And I've always been used to taking the SkyTrains, and I think it adds an experience to taking the train, because you actually get to, it's like a sightseeing
to fully see
journey.
the city.
Yeah, because when I was younger, I remember with my grandma on my dad's side, she always lived in Vancouver, and so from our suburb, it's about like 50 to 60 kilometers away, so about 35 to 40 miles away, let's say, from us. So I would always take transit over there, and but then when I would stay with my grandma, we would, just as an activity to do, sometimes we'd ride the entire line of one of the subways or SkyTrains. So I remember when the fourth line opened up several years ago, called the Evergreen. We just rode that because it was an elevated one too, and you get off and go to the mall or have something to eat, do whatever, and then come back, and you get to see stuff. Right, it's a nice experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that part is true. I've been to New York a couple times, and I do get disoriented when I'm coming out of the subway, coming down from underground. You're looking around yourself, and it takes a while to get your bearings of, okay, I turn right out of this exit even though it feels like I should go straight. And that was never the case in Chicago. Like you see the building that you're going to from the train platform on effectively the third story or so, 3 stories up. Then you go down and you go to the building. Like you just kind of know where you are because you can always see it. And so there are pros and cons, but I do fully think that as buildings don't get moved, and as I mentioned in the beginning of this, that like roads just keep getting wider for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's just for cars, and that like ground space is a premium. And I think if there are means to elevate or sublevate, I don't know.
Sublevate, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, sure.
I just made that up.
Yeah.
Elevate or sublevate.
Yeah, that's a word.
Our rail transit. That I think that's a fairly, a high, expensive barrier to entry, but when it's done, and then you just have to like maintain it as everything else. But an added element of subways, at least in Minneapolis, in my opinion, would be that you don't have to worry about plowing them when they're underground, because we get long winters. This winter of 2022 to 2023 is the 3rd snowiest in Minnesota's history. And that's a whole lot of snow fell. And, trains they run on tracks, and so they're less susceptible to potholes, but snow still falls in front of them, and so there's still like maintenance. Like you need a snow train to go out before the passenger train can go.
Yeah.
And so like that is, I'd say, the one leading element my leading opinion as to why I would want more subway. But ultimately, it's ridiculous to think that in order for everyone to be able to move effectively is that it'll take 200 feet on every single road, like 200 feet wide we need 3 lanes for cars, we need a 10-foot wide sidewalk, we need a 15-foot wide cycle track, and then we need a train that needs like 20 feet per direction. I'm not doing math, but that's a lot of space that it takes up. But then there goes the tax base, and like then the city can't afford for what it has.
Yeah.
It can't maintain that. And I do think that in areas, I think you mentioned Las Vegas earlier, and like Phoenix, that they don't get winters per se, but their tax base is so spread out that it pulls from the entire city to repair just a part of the road in one part of that city.
Yeah.
And then like people aren't spending as much, or I don't know how to deal with that demographic change, but
and just as an aside, Phoenix, I saw this video a long time ago on Phoenix and how I didn't realize it had this, but it has so many empty lots of land.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like, but I think the city buys it up when, let's say, the business or the house or whatever is foreclosed on and goes under, and the city, I think, buys it up, and then but then they don't do any, and then they tear down the building, but then there's nothing put on
Empty land.
Yeah, so it's just empty land. So like, and it's actually interesting if you actually look at Phoenix from Google Maps, you see what I'm talking about. Like
Really?
you just have like residential areas where it's there's houses just kind of spotted all over the place because there's empty lots in between, and I feel like, let's say, if a city like that, like Phoenix, becomes like that way, where you just have this, there's no sense of community or whatever, then I think it might also be an excuse to not put any to upgrade the city, because we're like, oh, no, not enough people are living here.
Yeah.
We own half the land anyway. So yeah, we're not going to put in a bus line, or we're not going to work on these roads here or anything, right? But yeah, man.
Yeah, certainly.
Like, wow, what's your kind of favorite city in the U.S., let's say? Like, if you had to move somewhere else, long term, let's say just in America, what do you think? Where do you think you would go? Would you go back to Chicago? Because I know my personal opinion of Chicago, I think it's very nice, very I definitely livable, international city. I could live there, no problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I've spent probably 15 years of my life just like looking at maps, fantasizing about all the cities that I would want to live in. But that doesn't give you you don't get a sense of the culture or like how much something costs, the cost of living, from just looking at a map.
No.
Like, you get geography, you get your bearings. Like, I went to Toronto without a smartphone, and I was able to, just because I was looking at maps and planning my itinerary, I was able to go navigate my way around Toronto. But my time there, I met some people, and granted, I was there for a concert, stayed in a hostel, and then left. It was only 2 nights, but it didn't really wow me as this could be home.
Yeah.
And so geographically, and like just pulling up the biking and like transit overlays on Google Maps, it's just like, oh, this is a great place, hypothetically, of anywhere, for example. But like Chicago and New York, I would say, come to mind for how big they are. They do have fairly, like, quite substantial transit, and then the bikeability is there because the cities are more dense. But for places that I've been and experienced the culture, truthfully, like San Diego, I really like San Diego, California. I do have a family member there, and it'd be neat to see him more, my uncle. But like, despite, like, there is all hills. I have gone on a bike ride there, and it is more strenuous, and they've got, like, it's California, so every road is 7 lanes wide, and like, it's just driving capital everywhere. But the climate is excellent. The people that I've met, and since I have spent more time there, I like the vibe of San Diego. And the ocean is a magical place.
Yeah.
And
what about have you been to Denver, like the city of Denver, downtown? Because I hear from a few people that they want to maybe move on to Colorado next, to try living there and everything in Denver. And from what I hear from people that have gone to Denver, I've never been into the city center or anything like that, but apparently it is quite nice, especially for the size of the city. They say it's kind of livable, or like at least there's stuff happening downstairs. People that live there in the center. What are your thoughts on that city?
I have never. I think my only time on the ground in Denver proper, I was driving through, and I just wanted to see the Capitol, and I think that we wound up parking. Yeah. But it was take the students to school day, and so there's just school buses everywhere. Like, that is my only actual Denver experience.
Oh, okay.
I haven't been. I want to, and I will be going this summer. For another family member who lives in Boulder, Colorado. But from what I've heard, like developmentally, that Denver is doing a good job where they're building new housing, and it's like they're building enough where it's kind of able to keep the price of housing everywhere kind of flat.
Oh,
Like
okay.
that's not a glut. That's not, but it also isn't so like throttled.
Yeah.
As like some housing is like so highly regulated to build, and so the cost of living keeps rising because taxes rise, or if there's nowhere else, if there's no competition in people seeking housing, then the landlords, the owners of the property, can charge whatever they want because they know that there's blanking on that word, a lack of vacancies.
Okay.
And so people who can afford it will pay more than they should, and certainly more than I think the property is worth.
Yeah.
But there's no other option unless you want to move into a suburb and then have to drive more. And so that is an experience in Minneapolis here. For Denver, I think that they have built, or like they're in a substantial housing boom for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of cities are, but I think that across the rest, the cost of living in Denver is not rising as high as like the national average, I would say.
Okay.
Or as quickly as the national average.
Okay. Do you know where Chicago is relative to the national average in terms of cost of living?
In actual numbers, no, but I chose to live there because like when I lived in Chicago, I was further away from downtown, but it was Chicago, so I still had just as many resources.
Yeah.
That the apartment there, I think, was $100 less a month than the apartment that I moved into when I moved back to Minneapolis. And it was a 2-bedroom in Chicago, old, beautiful brick building. And then in Minneapolis, I moved back. It was kind of a 2-bedroom, but the other bedroom is in the basement. And it was just a dingy side-by-side duplex, like built in the 70s with, I would say, no character and a lot of like hollow doors and vinyl floors.
Yeah.
That should be an album cover somewhere. That's poetry. Flag that. Copywritten.
Hell yeah.
And so, yeah, like Chicago, I think, is good. I guess it depends where you live. But another city, just for sake of the metrics, I think Pittsburgh, like they actually,
Really?
their cost of living, or of housing,
Yeah.
like the average rent by square footage, it went down in 2017, I think. And I don't know if it, there's, again, economics and cities are extremely complex things. Like, this conversation is not meant to be anyone's advice, but these are my observations.
Professional advice.
And I try to be as honest and fair to every word that I say. But yeah, that was a fun fact about Pittsburgh, I suppose.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, it's I never thought of Pittsburgh like that.
That's a city I'm fascinated about for geography because it's at the confluence of 2 or 3 rivers.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's a valley that cities, like the houses are just built on hills, and it's like, gosh, that's cool. It's like the San Francisco of the Rust Belt.
Yeah.
In terms of just how much elevation they have.
Because it is like I think it is part of that Appalachian region, and the Appalachian region, from what I've looked up about it, is generally lower income, a little more poor. I mean, like nowadays, and Pittsburgh is, I think, the biggest city in that region. But Appalachians, for geography purposes, is incredibly beautiful. Like from the few times I've been there, but I've never thought about actually living in that region based on the current state of affairs there. But interesting, Pittsburgh. Hey, okay,
yeah.
I think for me, if I was to move to another city, like just in the U.S. For me, that's why I keep asking about Chicago. I don't know if you noticed, but
there's opportunities there.
Yeah.
And I think if you want to work, if you've got a good resume sort of thing, it's a good place. I was working as a die maker at that time, a CAD designer.
Yeah.
And the company that I worked for in the Twin Cities area had such a strong reputation that I just sent my resume. I got a call back 10 minutes later, like, "Hey, when can you have an interview?"
Really?
And so, I mean, surely that's not everyone's case, and a different
Yeah.
industry is. Everyone has different industries, but if you have that opportunity, or if the things line up for you to do so, I'd give it a chance. Like, I'm really grateful for the time I had there.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes even though I enjoy the Twin Cities, sometimes I think like, man, if only my company's office was in Chicago instead of Twin Cities region here.
Oh, yeah. If only I could just live somewhere bigger and
I mean, even though like now I'm not super into like the mega cities in general, mostly because of what they've become, like in terms of how expensive they are, how unaffordable, and just usually there's a certain attitude with the people, like Exhibit A, New York; Exhibit B, Toronto, is what I'm referring to. Los Angeles side, I'm sure has an attitude, but this whole idea of I'm better than you sort of thing, and then there's always this
is my address, so suck it.
Yeah,
like
right. Or it's like, I'm making like 150 grand a year. Like, you're nothing, man. And it's like.
I'm paying like $600,000 a month for
yeah, exactly,
for rent.
Exactly. So, but so that's kind of the one side of me that's like, well, Chicago would be going back into that sort of lifestyle, but I don't know if there's a certain attitude associated with Chicago, like in terms of the people that live there, of that whole snobby kind of attitude there. So,
yeah, I don't know. I was just happy to feel like I fit in, I would say. For my neighborhood, there was a grocery store I went into, and that was kind of where I got the most culture shock, where it was a lot of just like soccer moms, and not soccer moms, but people wearing sweatpants, Uggs, and like a tank top, like going grocery shopping, but still with like a lot of makeup on. It was like, you're in your pajamas, but you put your face on. And that was like the only jarring thing. Whereas like in the Loop, like downtown Chicago, that's where you just get a little bit of everyone. And I'd say real clothes, or, again, I like drinking at dive bars. So I'd find a windowless establishment with a Miller sign on it. And I'd say that's got to be a good time for a little bit. I'll give them some money. And that's where you see like face tattoos and torn tank tops, and just like whatever, like come as you are. Again, it's a bar. You're there for one thing.
Yeah.
in most cases. But yeah, like I enjoyed my time in Chicago. The only reason I left was the relationship started to fall apart and my bike was stolen.
Right.
And that I was working in a suburb of Chicago. Gosh, I think it took me like about 4.5 hours round trip if I would do a bike and train combination.
Oh, wow.
And that was round trip. But on days that I would drive, for the short period I owned a car, it was still like 3 hours. Like I was just in my car for like 3 hours a day. And so like at that point I was raging behind the wheel. Yeah. And that the extra hour and like 45 minutes each way it took for me just to bike and train, that was still preferred to me. Yeah. Because like biking, I'm just doing my own thing. Like I knew what my route was. I'd be able to zone out. But when you're behind the wheel of a car, you have to pay attention because you are the operator. Light turns green, you go. Yeah. And then that's just traffic as you get further away.
Because that's the thing with Chicago. It does have some pretty intense traffic because I noticed like basically any city that is on a body of water, so either the ocean, like on the coast, or the Great Lakes cities, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Toronto, whatever. There's always, it's geographically restricted, so meaning that all the civilization is basically all to one direction, right? Yep. So meaning all the highways and everything, they all stop at a certain point because there's the water. So basically the growth of the city only happens in one direction, either north or south or east or west, and so whereas in the Twin Cities we're not really geographically restricted, so that's why I find for me the traffic here, even when there is some congestion and stuff, it's still nothing compared to these other cities that I've visited and lived in for a while. So
traffic here, you're still moving, you're going slow, but at this point you just want something to complain about.
Exactly.
In my experience, is like, well, you're still moving.
Exactly.
Well,
then actually, and then last kind of topic I wanted to talk to you about. What are your thoughts on this kind of movement? Small movement I saw last year here when I moved here about removing the freeway, the interstate. Do you think that will have overall positive effects on the city? Let's say, because if you look on Google Maps, a lot of cities could do this, right?
Yes.
Do you think the neighborhoods would recover from that and actually I don't know, build a more urban kind of center from that? Because I know we've talked about this before, where when you put a freeway through cities, it cuts off neighborhoods from each other, right?
And it's built on land where houses apartments and people used to live anyways, and where did they go? Exactly.
So do you think that would be a good idea?
Oh, I do fully support it. The Twin Cities Boulevard is the 94 removal proposal at this point. In official terms, it only has legislature funding for a study of it, a feasibility study.
Yeah.
It's not in any means a going to happen situation yet. This is going to be years and years down the road, because it is as monumental of an undertaking to remove the freeway as it was to build it. But I think that it's inevitable that it absolutely is going to be a gain right off the bat. That a large section of 35 was closed for construction over the past couple of years, and traffic kind of went down while the roadway was inaccessible, or it was unusable.
Really?
And there's a big, I'll call it a myth, or fear mongering. People are just saying, well, if everyone is driving here, if you've got 50,000 cars on Highway 94 every day, where are they going to go? Well, they don't go anywhere. They'll do something else, or they'll just be sitting at a stoplight with everyone else.
Okay.
It's called induced demand, where if there's somewhere for someone to drive, they will drive that route. But if it isn't there, they'll find other things, or you're removing a single road that, or a highway is far from a road, but it's like a super road, if you will. But if you remove that, the normal road still exists. It's not like you're just building a dead end. You're going to be able to fill in land, and instead of where there's a bridge every quarter mile, you've just got land underneath it, so you get a street, so you can just cross this trench every block without needing the infrastructure of bridges. So I fully support it. It's something I would love to see in my lifetime, and I don't know how best to make that happen. By no means am I officially affiliated with it at all. It's just something.
No.
I get a postcard, I read it, and I read it. It's up my alley of interests.
Because I know I look at a lot of these other American cities, and I didn't really notice this before, but they have an interstate. They have a freeway, a ring freeway, just around downtown. I think I noticed this with I think Detroit is like this, Kansas City is an example, and that to me is looking at it now with my adult mind. I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of doesn't really make sense. Why do you need just a freeway that that has a radius of half a mile or whatever, just around downtown? That cuts off downtown, and then just the neighborhoods just outside of downtown, right? To have one kind of fluent kind of community, and the
ring roads in Minneapolis, I'd say it's the same thing. That you've got 94, Highway 94 on three sides of downtown, then you've got the Mississippi River on the other side.
Yeah.
And like it then just makes downtown feel like an island. Because you're either taking a bridge with a small sidewalk or an oversized roadway across the highway that it's not hidden, like you just see all those lanes of traffic underneath you, and then you're downtown, and it turns it into something else. Yeah. Whereas like if you could just walk downtown, you'd notice maybe the buildings get bigger, maybe there's more restaurants and bars per block than like your neighborhood 3 miles away from there. And I think that is a healthy, natural kind of full circle, that is what cities are like. Where there is population density, there should be more things to do. And like for the ring road, like your Detroit ring road, that if you're on a highway, you're not going to, I guess, a lot of people, I wouldn't be one to get on a highway for 2 exits. I'd say like, no, I'm not going to deal with that effort to get up to 65 miles an hour just to immediately get off again. Like if there's a practical way where there are some designs where 94 is a good use. But again, like if you've got a bridge, it will still be there. Like the footings will still be in the Mississippi River. The bridge would just be smaller, or it could be not just for an interstate.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting topics. We cover we get to the truth here on this.
I'd say so. I never thought I'd be asked about cities, and then we'd start talking about Celsius and Fahrenheit.
I know, right? But you know what I'm gonna do? Yeah. I'm gonna post these. I might post some of these as little separate episodes.
Oh, very nice.
Little clips, to get a little more content. But yeah, I actually didn't. I have no time limits on these things, but I didn't really think that we would go so long. This is actually
an hour?
I think this is the longest I've ever gone. It's an hour, coming up to an hour and a half almost.
No way. Jeez.
Yeah,
look at that.
I know, man. So
I mean, no wonder we should just be filming ourselves when we're at the bar just normally. There's your content. This is all we talk about. We talk about maps, your travels.
Right? So but I think now we're gonna take a break.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna set up because we have we have our one chip challenge that we gotta do.
That was Pockies coming along.
Our Pockies, that's right. So yeah.
Sounds good.
Anything you want to promote though, by the way, because usually what I do now is the person will say like, yeah, follow me on Instagram or I don't know, Facebook or whatever, or anything you want to promote, your writing, whatever. Go for it.
I'll say stay tuned. Let's hope Misha asks me back for another episode, and let's hope that I got something to promote then. Happy spring.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Yeah, I guess we're gonna go cry our eyes out from the spice that we're going to experience now. So anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll be back pretty soon. Okay.
Wow.